the silence where stars whisper secrets of eternity, the soul hears a call, subtle yet relentless, like the wind grazing the skin before a storm. This call is not for all, but for those who feel they were born for something greater than earthly toil. Yet not every soul who hears it will reach the journey's end. Being chosen is not a reward, but a heavy cross, demanding humility akin to shattered clay in the potter's hands. God extends a hand of salvation, yet he does not break human will. Gifts, prophecies, even great ministries, these are but sparks that fade if the heart does not surrender wholly. In a desert where sand holds the footprints of countless wanderers, one man stood beneath the heavens, feeling the pulse of his calling in his veins. He saw visions, pillars of fire, voices promising power and glory. His soul sang, but his mind demanded proof. He was chosen, yet unaware that election is not a crown, but a trial. God whispered in his dreams, "Bow down, release all that ties you to the earth." But the man gazed at his gifts, eloquence, strength, knowledge, believing they alone would lead him to his destiny. He did not see pride, like a shadow, creeping behind him, ready to swallow the light. The sand beneath his feet burned like embers, yet he ignored the pain. His eyes blazed with dreams of triumph, of crowds hanging on his words. He built temples in his imagination, but sought not God in the silence. His heart knew the calling demanded sacrifice, yet he chose the comfort of the known. Each morning he rose with resolve, but each night he lay down with emptiness in his chest. God did not force salvation upon him. He waited for the man to unclench fists grasping at illusions. This desert is not a place but a state of the soul. It dwells in every heart that hears the call, yet fears its cost. A gift without humility is like a torch without oil. It burns brightly but briefly. God does not save those who flee their own shadows, for salvation is not a gift, but a process. The man in the desert did not know his next step would determine whether he would become a vessel of light or ashes of forgotten promises. His story was only beginning, yet it already carried a warning. Election without surrender to God is a path to the abyss, not the summit. Who are you, standing at this crossroads? Do you hear the call that stirs you in the night? Are you ready to release all you deem yours for something greater than yourself? The desert awaits your answer, and its silence speaks louder than any words. Not every chosen one will be saved, for salvation is not a privilege, but a choice, demanding complete dissolution in the will of the one who called you from the dawn of time. In the twilight where echoes of voices merge with eternity, a man chosen by heaven stood at the edge of a cliff, clutching a gift that shone brighter than the sun. His words, like lightning, tore through the silence, and crowds listened, captivated by their power. He was a prophet whose heart once burned with a zeal for service, but now that fire fed on his own grandeur. The gift became not a bridge to God, but a mirror reflecting only himself. Not every soul who speaks in the name of heaven hears its voice, for pride drowns out the Creator's whisper. This man, whose name dissolved in the crowd's praise, once felt divine light touch his soul. He prayed in solitude, and the heavens answered. But glory, like poison, slowly seeped into his veins. He began to speak louder than he listened, to preach more brightly than he prayed. His words, once channels of the divine, became a theater where he played the starring role. Pride, like a web, entangled his heart, and he did not notice how prayer turned into monologue and service into a spectacle for adoring eyes. On a hilltop where the wind sang of eternal truths, he stood, surrounded by disciples yet alone before God. His lips proclaimed wisdom, but his soul rejected correction. When an elder quietly pointed out his flaws, the prophet turned away, calling it envy. When a friend whispered of humility, He heard only a threat to his greatness. His gift became a shield, hiding his cracks. But God sees the heart, not the stage. The heavens fell silent, for the prophet, blinded by himself, had replaced their voice with his own. Pride is not a loud cry, but a quiet whisper, convincing you that you stand above others. It disguises itself as holiness, confidence, righteousness. The prophet did not see how his gift, once a river of life, became a dry bed where no oil of grace flowed. He preached of freedom, but was captive to his ego. God does not take back the gift, but he steps away when the vessel prizes shine over substance. The prophet kept speaking, but his words no longer touched hearts. They echoed off walls he himself had built. Who is this prophet, whose voice thunders, but whose soul is silent? Are you not standing on that same hill, surrounded by praise yet distant from heaven? Pride is a shadow that grows while you look away. It steals the light while you believe yourself its source. God waits, but his time is not endless. Cast off the crown you placed upon yourself and return to the beginning, where God's voice was louder than yours. The prophet's path is not triumph, but humility, and only in it does the gift come alive again. In the night, where the moon casts shadows on scarred earth, a man whose soul was forged in the flames of trials walked a path strewn with shards of the past. His hands, once wielding the sword of faith, now clutched wounds that would not heal. He was a warrior whose calling burned like a torch in a storm, but the fire of his heart had turned to embers of bitterness. Not every soul who passes through fire emerges pure, for pain, unhealed, becomes chains that bind the spirit in captivity. This warrior, whose steps thundered like war drums, once stood shoulder to shoulder with brothers, fighting for truth. He saw betrayals, lies, watched those he trusted fall. Each disappointment, like a dagger, pierced his heart, yet he sought no healing. He made pain his armor. His eyes, once radiant with hope, now saw threat in every gesture, deceit in every smile. Bitterness, like poisonous ivy, entwined his spirit, and he did not notice how it choked his calling. At the edge of a forest, where trees whispered of forgotten truths, he paused to kindle a fire. The flames crackled, but gave no warmth. Like his faith, now serving only as a shield. He told himself his solitude was strength, his anger righteousness. But in the stillness of the night, as the wind carried echoes of heaven, he felt emptiness. God had not turned away from him, but the warrior had turned from God, building a wall from his wounds. His sword, once raised for others, now served only to deflect the world. Bitterness is not a storm, but a slow poison that taints the soul. It whispers that you are right, the world is guilty, your pain justifies all. The warrior did not see how his resentment, like a dark cloud, blocked the light of blessings. He prayed, but his words were a cry, not a plea. He fought, but not for God, against shadows he himself had cast. God waited for the warrior to lower his shield, but he gripped it tighter than his faith. The heavens cannot fill a heart that rejects healing. Who are you, warrior, whose wounds have become your banner? Are you not walking this path, seeing enemies where none exist? Bitterness is a prison you build yourself, but the key lies in forgiveness. God does not save those who cling to their pain, for salvation demands release. Lower your sword, shed your armor, let light touch your wounds. The warrior's path is not war with the world, but victory over self, and only in this does the calling come alive again. Beneath the stars, where heaven's light brushes the earth, a man in white robes offered prayers whose words rang like hymns of angels. His voice was pure, his gestures holy, and crowds saw in him a vessel of divine radiance. Yet deep within his soul, where no one looked, A rebellion smoldered, like a spark in dry grass. Not every soul that bows before the altar surrenders its heart to God, for outward holiness can conceal inward defiance. This man, whose face glowed with meekness, was a master of masks. In public, he spoke of humility, but in solitude, his thoughts grumbled against the heavens. He performed rituals, but his soul bargained with God, choosing what to accept and what to reject. His compromises, like cracks in crystal, were invisible to the eye but palpable to the spirit. He preached purity while secretly cherishing desires that contradicted his words. His faith was a theater where he played a role but did not live it. In a temple where candles cast shadows on the walls, he stood, raising hands to the sky. His prayers sounded flawless, but his heart was silent. He knew God demanded sincerity, yet he preferred deals. I'll give you this, but keep that for myself. Each compromise built an invisible wall, separating him from the Creator's presence. He convinced himself his secret deviations were mere weaknesses, unworthy of notice. But God sees not the facade, but the essence, and every hidden lie became a stone in the foundation of his fall. Rebellion is not always loud like a storm. Sometimes it is quiet, like a whisper in the night. The hidden rebel does not shout against God. He simply chooses himself. His soul, like a garden overgrown with weeds, lost its fertility, yet he did not see, blinded by the sheen of his reputation. His prayers, once alive, became empty rituals. His service, a performance for those who could not see his heart. God waited for the man to shed his masks and reveal his nakedness, but he clung to the illusion of holiness. Who are you, standing in this temple, whose words shine but whose soul hides darkness? Are you not wearing a mask to please the world, but not God? Hidden rebellion is a poison that erodes calling from within. God accepts no half measures, for salvation demands complete surrender. Tear off the veil hiding your truth and stand before heaven without deceit. The path of the chosen is not a game of holiness, but honesty before the one who sees all. In the radiance of dawn, where dew reflects unseen light, a man stood in a plaza, surrounded by adoring gazes. His name rang like a hymn, and his presence ignited hearts. He was a chosen one, whose life seemed a bridge between earth and heaven, but deep within his soul, the throne of God was occupied by his own shadow. Not every soul who wears the mantle of calling serves the Creator, for an idol crafted from one's identity eclipses the light of truth. This man, whose steps inspired awe, once felt the divine wind touch his spirit. He was called to lead others to the light, but over time, his heart clung to glory. His fasts, prayers, even tears became offerings not to God, but to the image he had crafted. He loved titles, prophet, teacher, leader, more than the presence of the one who granted those gifts. His soul, like a mirror, reflected not the heavens, but his own grandeur, and he did not see how this brilliance blinded him. In the plaza, where crowds gathered to hear his voice, he spoke of eternity but sought approval. Every word, every gesture was calculated to bolster his pedestal. He prayed loudly, but his heart whispered of recognition. His ministry became a platform where he exalted himself, not God. Emptiness, like a cold wind, seeped into his soul, but he drowned it out with applause. God waited for him in the secret chamber, where there are no spectators, but the man preferred the stage where all eyes were on him. Idolatry is not the worship of statues, but the love of who you believe yourself to be. It steals holiness, turning a calling into a performance. This man did not notice how his soul, once a vessel of oil, became dry clay, unable to hold grace. His words still sounded, but they lacked power, for they came not from God, but from a thirst for affirmation. The heavens do not fill those who worship their own reflection, for salvation demands that the soul's throne belong to one alone. Who are you, standing in this plaza, whose life shines for others but fades before God? Have you not built an idol from your name, titles, achievements? Idolatry begins small, with a desire to be seen, heard, recognized. But God sees the heart, not the stage. Leave the crowd, enter the secret chamber where there is no applause, only presence. The path of the chosen is not glory, but sacrifice, where you surrender yourself for the one who called you. In the twilight, where shadows merge with the breath of the earth, a man stood by a stream, its waters reflecting stars, but not his heart. His voice thundered like a waterfall, teaching others how to live, how to believe, how to walk toward heaven. Yet within his soul gaped an emptiness, for he rejected any word that did not flatter his mind. Not every soul who teaches is ready to learn, for a vessel that deems itself full cannot receive the oil of grace. This man, whose speeches drew crowds, was once a disciple thirsting for truth. His mind absorbed knowledge, and his heart sought God. But over time, he came to believe he knew all that was needed. His words, like swords, cut through others' doubts, but he himself could not bear doubt in his rightness. Correction, even as gentle as a friend's whisper, seemed to him an insult. He saw in it not help but attack, and his soul, once open, became a fortress where light could not enter. By the stream, where waters sang of eternal flow, he spoke, heedless of their song. His lips proclaimed wisdom, but his heart rejected guidance. When an elder offered counsel, he called it ignorance. When a disciple asked a question, he heard it as a challenge. His pride, like a crust on clay, kept the water of life from seeping within. He taught of humility, but would not bow, convincing himself his path was the only true one. God waited for the man to become soft, like wax, but he remained stone. Unteachability is not a loud rebellion, but a quiet stubbornness that seals the ears of the soul. It whispers that you are above instruction, that your knowledge is a crown, and others' words are mere chaff. This man did not see how his soul, once a flowing stream, had become a stagnant pool, unable to hold new life. His teachings still drew crowds, but they lacked the fire of heaven, for they came from a mind that no longer sought its source. The heavens do not pour into vessels that reject shaping, for growth requires a heart open to molding. Who are you, standing by this stream, whose voice roars but whose ears are sealed? Are you not the one who teaches yet refuses to learn, who speaks yet shuns correction? Unteachability is a fortress you build against your own calling. God waits for you to soften, to become clay in his hands, ready to be reshaped. Step away from the podium, kneel by the stream, and let its waters wash away the pride that seals your soul. The path of the chosen is not a throne of knowledge, but a journey of constant becoming. In the shade of an ancient oak, where leaves whisper of eternal wounds, a man sat alone, surrounded by a silence louder than cries. His eyes, once ablaze with the fire of calling, now gazed into emptiness, and his heart held memories of betrayal. He was a chosen one, but the church he served left scars on his soul, and he withdrew, building walls around his faith. Not every soul wounded seeks healing, for pain can become a prison, where the spirit rejects even God's hand. This man, whose steps once led to the altar, knew how to sing praises and pray for others. He was a pillar of the community, but words that cut and deeds that betrayed made him a stranger among his own. Instead of seeking heaven's balm, he chose isolation, calling it discernment. His solitude, like a fortress, shielded him from new wounds, but also from light. He told himself independence was his strength, but it was a chain binding him in captivity. Beneath the oak, where the wind carried echoes of past prayers, he sat, surrounded by his grievances. He called his detachment discipline, his refusal to connect wisdom. But deep within, he knew his pain had become his master. He rejected any spiritual structure, deeming it a trap, yet did not see how his independence was an infection poisoning his calling. God waited for the man to step out of his fortress, but he built its walls higher, fearing new pain more than emptiness. Offense is not a storm, but a slow fire that burns bridges to salvation. It whispers that you are right, that the world is unworthy of your trust. The offended chosen did not see how his isolation, like a dark forest, hid heaven's light from him. His prayers grew rare, his faith cold, for he rejected those who could have been his covering. God does not lift those who flee the process, for a calling requires not only fire, but a community where the fire is sustained. Who are you, sitting under this oak, whose pain has become your fortress? Are you not hiding from the world, calling it holiness? Offense is the chain you forged, but God holds the key. Step out from the shadows. Let light touch your scars. Accept the hand of those who walk beside you. The path of the chosen is not solitude, but humility before the process, where wounds are healed in the presence of God and his people. At the edge of a field, where grasses sway under the breath of the wind, a man stood, gazing at the horizon where heavens touched the earth. His heart held visions of a great path, but his feet remained still, as if chained to the ground. He was called, yet every step was postponed, dissolving in endless pondering. Not every soul who sees the stars walks toward them, for fear, disguised as waiting, extinguishes the fire of calling. This man, whose eyes reflected dreams of destiny, once heard a voice summoning him to greatness. He wrote plans, prayed for direction, but always found a reason to wait. "The time isn't right," he whispered, cloaking fear with words of divine timing. His soul, like a ship ready to sail, lingered in the harbor where waves of doubt crashed it against the dock. He spoke of faith, but lived in a cage built of excuses. In the field, where the sun painted golden patterns, he sat, sifting through his intentions. His notebooks brimmed with blueprints of the future, yet none became action. He prayed, but his prayers sought signs, not courage. Fear, like a shadow, crept behind him, whispering that the time had not come, that conditions were not perfect. He waited for flawlessness, blind to how each day of delay snuffed out the sparks of his calling. God called him to move, but he sought confirmations already given. Delay is not laziness, but an illusion of control that binds the soul. It masquerades as wisdom, as patience, but at its core, it is flight from risk. This man did not see how his destiny, like a river, seeped into the sand while he stood on the shore. His faith was loud in words, but quiet in deeds, for movement demands not just dreams, but resolve. God does not wait for perfect conditions, for a calling is born in a step, not in hesitation. Who are you, standing in this field, whose dreams shine but whose steps are silent? Are you not deferring your destiny, calling it waiting on God? Fear is the chain you forged, but the key is in your hands. Take a step, even a small one, even a frightening one. God does not call to perfection, but to movement. The path of the chosen is not waiting for signs, but the courage to walk where the stars already burn for you. On a shore where waves write the script of eternity, a man stood, staring at a line drawn in the sand before him. This line, thin as the thread of fate, divided his past from his calling, his fears from God's promises. The wind carried the voice of heaven, but his heart trembled, for he knew. A step across this line would be a point of no return. Not every chosen one will cross this threshold, for salvation demands not perfection, but complete surrender to the Creator's will. This man, whose soul bore the echoes of all prior battles, saw in this line a reflection of his masks: pride, offense, fear. He had been a prophet, a warrior, a rebel, an idolater, but all were mere shadows of his true self. His calling shone like a star, yet he clung to the old, grasping illusions of control. God called him to shed all he thought he was, but he hesitated, fearing the loss of what no longer served him. The line in the sand was not a barrier, but an invitation to die to self, to be born for heaven. On the shore, where the sea sang of eternal freedom, he stood, feeling time press against his heart. Every mask he wore was an anchor holding him in place. Pride whispered he was already great. Offense declared the world unjust. Fear insisted the step forward was too risky. But God accepts no half measures. He demands all. The line in the sand was a final warning. You cannot be freed while guarding what enslaves you. His soul, like a ship, had to leave the shore to find its course. Surrender is not weakness, but a fire that burns the old to reveal the new. It demands you face the line in the sand and admit your gifts, wounds, dreams are nothing without God. This man did not see how his resistance, like a dark veil, obscured the light of his destiny. God does not force salvation. He waits for you to choose to step across the line. This is the moment when masks fall and the soul stands naked before the Creator, ready for transformation. Who are you, standing before this line, whose heart beats between fear and calling? Are you not clinging to shadows of the past, afraid to become what God designed? The line in the sand is not an end, but a beginning. Take the step, release all that was your idol, and let God break the old self. The path of the chosen is not preservation of self, but transformation through surrender, where you become a vessel of His will. In the heart of dawn, where light pierces the darkness, a man stood atop a hill where earth met heaven. His soul, scarred by battles with itself, trembled like a flame before the wind. He heard a voice, clear as a morning bell. Rise, renounce what holds you, and go. Not every chosen one will be saved, but every soul that breathes can still choose to die to the old and be born for the eternal. This man, whose heart echoed with pride, offense, and fear, stood at a crossroads. He had been a prophet, a warrior, a rebel, an idolater, but all these faces were mere shadows hiding his true essence. Now he knew. Salvation is not a gift, but a decision, demanding total surrender. God does not break the will, but calls to a life where the old self burns in the fire of repentance. His soul, like clay, was ready for the Creator's hands to become a vessel of new light. On the hill, where the wind carried promises of a new beginning, he fell to his knees. His prayer was not words, but an act of surrender. He released all he thought was his: titles, wounds, dreams of grandeur. He understood that a calling is not triumph, but transformation, where the soul becomes transparent to God. The line in the sand lay behind, but the path ahead was open. Heaven waited, but not forever. The time of his destiny was in his hands. He rose, without looking back, and took a step, knowing each one brought him closer to who he was meant to be. Repentance is not a fall, but a birth, where the old dies so the new can live. It takes courage to face your shadows and declare, I refuse to be one God cannot save. This man, standing on the hill, chose not to wait for signs, but to move toward the light. His calling came alive, for he gave himself to the one who called him from the dawn of time. God does not force salvation, but opens doors to those who choose to enter. Who are you, standing on your hill, whose soul hears this final call? Are you not lingering, fearing to release what is already dead? Time does not wait, but heaven is still open. Rise, repent, go. Your path is not finished while your heart still beats. Cast off the chains that hold you and become a vessel through which God works His will. This is your moment. Do not let it pass, for the destiny of the chosen is born in the decision to go.